Tournament situation is desperate. At this point, 40 minutes have passed since the start of the second stage of the Tournament of Power. Before the first 20 minutes, the participants of Team 4, composed by the warriors from Universe 6 and 7, put in a lot of effort facing reasonably powerful opponents that considerably challenged their abilities, and as a result, many of them were a little tired and injured. But at least this strategy produced good results, as they all got a good amount of points, and now they could relax a little more and face weaker enemies. But apart from Team 4's warriors, the other participants also had their own methods. Some methods were working well, while others not so much. Jimizu, for example, started the second stage of the tournament with the tactic of destroying weaker androids, but destroying them in large numbers, using teleport to get to them faster. That way, despite scoring low for each enemy destroyed, he managed to do it with great speed and consistency. But the problem is that this tactic proved to be very tiring, and the Yard Rat was barely holding on, and all he managed to do so far is a little over 20,000 points. At this point, Jimizu is so tired that even the lowest powered androids are managing to resist his attacks, which is a real catastrophe for him. The trio, Bergamo, Basil, and Lavender, are not in such a good situation either. The trio's tactic was for the three of them to fight together. That way, they could fight slightly stronger opponents, and then they split the points between them. But the strategy wasn't working so well. Maybe splitting the score for 3 people all the time isn't as advantageous as they thought. Despite having already faced many enemies, their score was not as good as it should be. The one with the most points among them was Bergamo, and even he had only 33,000 points. The 3 Universe 9 warriors were completely tired and also angry at having so few points, and the infighting was starting. Ribrianne isn't doing so well either. The warrior of love did not fight so well in solitude, and this causes great discomfort in the woman, who fought the androids without much effort. Even with so much time competition, Ribrianne still had less than 40,000 points, which is very low considering her ability. Dispo preferred the strategy of speeding across the planet, facing simply every android he saw, regardless of whether that enemy was high level or low level. The only exceptions were enemies who could be more powerful than him, of course. But this strategy also proved to be very tiring, and despite getting a huge amount of points, almost 140,000 points, Dispo was very tired and may not be able to keep up that pace until the end. Topo followed the strategy of facing the strongest enemies he could find, and at that moment he ended a fight against an enemy that was worth 360,000 points. A fight that Topo was able to win without resorting to his last transformation, but whose victory was not easy, as well as all of the Pride Troop leaders' latest fights. As a result of his decisions to take on only the strongest he can find, Topo has so far 405,000 points, but he feels he won't get much more than that from now on because of his physical attrition. Jiren is using a similar strategy as Topo, and at this point he destroyed 2 androids that were each worth 350,000 points. But unlike Topo, Jiren isn't that injured or tired, although some minor injuries are visible on his body. Universe 11's strongest warrior already had 1,112,500 points, and so far Jiren has the highest score among all participants. Frieza and Cooler preferred the strategy of taking on every enemy they find, and luckily they didn't find anyone that caused them too much trouble. The result of this strategy was good for them, and they got a good amount of points and are not so injured or tired. Frieza currently has 144,998 points, and Cooler has 88,336. But since neither of them is reasonably tired or injured, they can still score a lot more by the end of the game. In short, almost all the warriors had already decided whether or not they were satisfied with their score. Some had already accepted their failure, while others were content with a good number and decided not to try too hard. But there are still those who wanted to be on top. From space, 2 flashes of light can be seen passing side by side through planet Arena. Looking closer, it's Goku and Vegeta who fly at high speed across the planet's sky. Vegeta tells Goku that he will win, but Kakarot disagrees, saying that he will win. Seeing something in a mountainous region, Vegeta quickly flies there. Goku, also seeing something in a large field, goes too. Arriving in the mountains, Vegeta encounters a group of several androids. From what Vegeta was seeing, their score ranged from 500 to 2,000 points. The prince smiles. They weren't a big deal, but they would give him a few more points. The androids fly towards Vegeta and surround him to attack them all at once, but the Universe 7 warrior releases a large amount of energy at once, destroying all surrounding enemies. In those few seconds, Vegeta scored another 13,249 points. Goku arriving at the field saw some androids, and in just one look, he found that the score for them varied only between 300 and 500. Goku is very disappointed. He still hasn't learned how to use this ability so well, and he continues to encounter weaker enemies than he should. The androids all fly towards him, but Goku resolves the situation by firing many ki balls at them, destroying each of them with one attack. In the end, he only got 8,800 points higher. Vegeta is now in a C region. He faces a group of androids whose power varies between 3,000 and 10,000. Vegeta fires a Gallic gun at opponents, and as he destroys targets, he moves his hands guiding the energy in a horizontal line to destroy others. That way, in a single attack, he destroys many enemies. Vegeta smiles. Now he has 48,000 more points. He notices more enemies not so far away, and then quickly flies away. Vegeta arrives at an island. That's where the enemies he saw were. But when he gets there, Goku has already destroyed them all. Vegeta gets very angry about that. He complains to his rival. "Hey, Kakarot, from what I felt, your energy was much further away from this place than I was. Don't tell me you used the instant transmission to get here before me." Goku confirms. "Of course I used it. If I can teleport, why am I wasting time just flying? Using instant transmission, I can reach opponents faster and score more points. That's a no-brainer." The candid way in which Goku admits this makes Vegeta furious. "How dare you admit to cheating so blatantly, Kakarot? Don't you have an ounce of shame?" But Goku disagrees, thinking, "I don't understand why this is cheating, Vegeta. Besides, you also have the instant transmission. Why don't you use it?" The Prince of Saiyan replies, "Because I promised myself I wouldn't use this technique. I've done it a few times here in this tournament, but I won't do it anymore." With a crooked smile, Goku says, "Well, it's not my problem if you make these rules for yourself." The two notice more enemies in one direction, so Goku says goodbye to Vegeta with a teasing smile on his face and teleports. Furious, Vegeta says to him, "Damn Kakarot." Goku arrives with a teleport in a desert where he detects the androids, and seeing the enemies, he notices the score for them varies between 5,000 and 8,000. Smiling, Goku charges at them, destroying each one with one blow. But at one point, when Goku was about to hit one of the androids, Vegeta came flying around Goku's side and kicked him, knocking him away from the opponent. After doing so, seeing the android coming to attack him, Vegeta destroys him with an energy attack, and then fires several energy balls at nearby enemies, finishing them all. As he stands up, Goku complains to him, asking if he's gone mad for attacking him like that. But Vegeta replies that if he wants to appeal, he can do that too. The two notice more enemies, and then when Goku was ready to teleport once more, he is hit in the back by Vegeta's energy attack, which knocks him down, and taking this opportunity, Vegeta takes off flying. As he stands there, Goku yells at Vegeta with a comical expression of anger, saying that he's a very cheating man. The group of androids is on a large rock in the desert when Vegeta arrives flying in at the same time as Goku arrives with the instant transmission. Both initiate the attack at the same time. In a large hall, the great Zenos watched the tournament. The supreme deities of the multiverse were seated on their thrones, surrounded by the two guards at their sides and with Daishinkan in front. They were on a large floating platform, and in front of this platform was a large transparent globe, similar to a crystal ball. And on this globe, as in a television, the entire competition was shown. But there were other similar platforms dotted around the site, 3 more specifically. In one of them were all 12 angels, 12 supreme Kais, and the 8 gods of destruction that had mortals participating in the tournament. On another platform were the 4 gods of destruction that would participate in the next stage of the tournament: Iwan, Arak, Likir, and Jin. And on the other platform were all the participants who were eliminated in the first stage of the tournament. The Zenos, while watching the tournament, have an expression of boredom. Noting this, Daishinkan says, "What's the matter, my lord? Is the tournament not pleasing you?" The Zenos explained that at the beginning of this stage of the competition, it was really fun to watch, as almost all the participants, especially those on Goku's team, were all in very challenging fights that were really fun to watch. But now it seems that almost all the participants are in 2 easy fights. Understanding the Zenos' complaint, Daishinkan explains what is happening and says, "I understand what you mean, my lords. This is happening because at the beginning, the participants were eager to accumulate a large amount of points to guarantee qualification for the next stage. Because of that, they pushed their limits against the androids, and because of that, they had very challenging fights. which in turn were more attractive fights. But because of this initial tactic, they got a lot of points and also got a lot tired. So they decided to use a safer tactic, where they face weaker enemies. Few participants are striving to continue facing the strongest. They are Son Goku, Vegeta, and Jiren. Hearing this, the Zenos are even more dissatisfied, so this stage of the tournament will be very boring until the end. They have to do something to change that, right? What if instead of the androids only fighting if provoked, they start acting more aggressively and attacking everyone at once? Daishinkan says that if this is done, the participants will have to face many enemies at once, and with varying levels of power. They can be taken to extreme wear and tear. But the Zenos aren't worried about that. They just want to know if the fights will be more fun to watch. Daishinkan says yes. The fights will probably be more attractive to watch if all androids attack the participants, especially the stronger ones. Hearing this confirmation, the supreme gods of the entire multiverse order the Grand Priest, the rules must be changed. Suddenly, all the participants who are on the planet hear Daishinkan's voice, who says the following words. All participants listen carefully. In order to make the games more attractive to the almighty Zeno, some rules are being changed. From now on, all androids will be instructed to attack all of you, regardless of whether you are challenged or not. This means that from now on, you will be attacked by all the androids that are scattered around the planet. Be prepared to face enemies of varying power levels, and also do your best to please the Almighty. Good luck. Participants receive the news with great concern, and it doesn't take long for them to see lots and lots of androids approaching. From now on, everything would be extremely difficult, and the battle wouldn't just be for score, but to remain standing. How will each of them handle it? Goku and Vegeta are in the middle of the desert. They have just destroyed another group of androids, just one more group among dozens. But suddenly, they find themselves surrounded by an army of robots, which fill the skies like flies. All these enemies come towards them. Seeing the number of points of the androids in his vision, Vegeta says, the power level of each of them is completely varied, but I don't think any of them are that strong. Damn it, we'll have to keep fighting these weak robots. But thinking differently from Vegeta, Goku tries to show the good side. But there are still so many. Maybe it's fun to fight them, said Goku, and he continues. And think of the bright side, Vegeta. Now there are so many of them that we no longer need to fight over who will destroy the enemies. After hearing Kakarot's words, Vegeta also smiles, as he transforms into Super Saiyan 2 and says, thinking about it that way, this could be really good. I will destroy more enemies than you, Kakarot. While also transforming into Super Saiyan 2, Goku says, no way. Who will win will be me. Back to back, the two Saiyans fight at the same time. Vegeta firing a final flash and Goku firing a Kamehameha. On both sides, a large number of robots are destroyed. Vegeta leaves Goku's side, flying towards a group of enemies that continue to advance, and he flies through them, leaving a trail of destruction. Smiling, the Saiyan says, you're a bunch of worms. Your powers don't compare to mine, the great prince of Saiyans. Goku, seeing that Vegeta has already started his fun in the midst of the android army, teleports himself into the middle of a group of enemies as well, where he destroys many of them by shooting several key balls. Smiling, he says, come on, androids, give everything you've got. But despite Goku and Vegeta being excited about this situation and handling it all well, many participants didn't think like that. Jimizu, for example, used his instant transmission to run away from a series of enemies that were attacking him. But whenever he teleported to a place, in that place, there was already an android ready to attack him, and he needed to do the technique again to go to another place, which also already had another enemy present. There are enemies everywhere. Obviously, this had to go wrong at some point, right? And this happens when Jimizu teleports to escape an enemy, but he stops right in front of an android who, raising his hands with a strange ability, captures the yard rat by hitting him like a fly. Being comically squeezed by the robot, Jimizu complains, damn, that's not fair. I've spent too much energy before. I didn't expect this to happen. Changing the rule like that is not fair. Ribrianne fights a group of androids across the sky. She destroys many of them with just one blow, but one of them, who is clearly more powerful than average, manages to parry her attack. And another robot, which is also more powerful than average, hits her with a heavy blow. As she travels through the sky on the force of the impact, Ribrianne cries comically, saying that as if fighting in solitude wasn't bad enough, she now has to fight such a hard fight. Things are definitely not looking good on the side of love today. Frieza and Cooler are back-to-back firing multiple energy lasers from their fingers, destroying approaching enemies in large numbers. Cooler comments that these gods are damned, changing the rules so suddenly. Frieza agrees, saying that's how they are, treating them as if they were miserable toys. Not a bit of Frieza's hypocrisy in saying that, right? Bergamo, Basil, and Lavender are surrounded by many androids, and each of them has to fight individually against a group of enemies. There were so many enemies that they couldn't even fight as a team anymore, as they were inevitably separated by the sheer number of machines that had accumulated around them. And as expected, not being able to fight together, the Universe 9 trio had great difficulty dealing with opponents. Topo was already extremely tired from all the hard fights he had been through, but despite that, an army of androids was coming towards the leader of the Pride Troopers, who stretched out his hand towards them while shouting. Topo says, "Justice Flash!" Topo fires many energy blasts towards the androids, destroying dozens of them, filling the sky with multiple explosions. But despite this, so many androids being destroyed, many reach Topo, who needs to destroy them, but with his own blows, using his great power to destroy each enemy with a single attack. Dispo runs across an open field, leaving a trail of destruction from weaker robots that he destroyed with a single blow. But Universe 11's sprinter run is interrupted when he lands a blow on a robot that resists his attack, forcing him to stop. In order to not be hit by the robot's counterattack, Dispo retreats. After that, he quickly has to take the attention of the first android, when another, flying above him, fires several energy attacks that Dispo needs to dodge by running. But this run is also stopped by another android that surround the area in which he runs. Stopping and watching his enemies with a tired expression, Dispo thinks, "These guys aren't weak. I will be able to beat them quickly. But the worst thing is that in addition to these, others are coming. Damn, I should have saved more energy." Jiren floats through the sky as he is surrounded by a large number of androids that come flying towards him from all directions. Universe 11's most powerful warrior solves this problem by releasing an immense amount of energy at once, which expands and spreads through the environment, destroying all enemies around with a radius of at least 1 kilometer. After doing this, annoyed Jiren says to himself with an annoyed expression, "Weak, extremely weak. How disappointing." The members of Team 4, with the exception of Goku and Vegeta, were all together when the great army of enemies came towards them. At first they tried to keep together, but the sheer amount of opponents inevitably made them lose each other. Broly ends up moving away from his group, being dragged by a group of androids that join forces to drag him through the sky. But the legendary Super Saiyan solves this problem by releasing a large amount of energy that blows away enemies while blasting them all. But the next moment, he's surrounded by opponents again, and faces them all as he takes his fighting stance. Also, lone among so many enemies, Hit is standing still as he watches the dozens of androids surround him. Looking at the enemies, he sees that they are not worth many points, which means they are weak. "This will take a second less," he says. One moment, all the androids surrounding the Universe 6 assassin rush forward to attack, but the next moment they are all destroyed. But then looking in the other direction, Hit sees more androids coming. Dozens or hundreds of enemies at once. He sighs, understanding that things aren't going to go as fast as he'd like. Universe 6's 3 Saiyans, Kaba, Kale, and Caulifla, managed to stick together. They faced a large group of androids, all transformed into Super Saiyans. Piccolo was also alone now. He was on the ground of a stony region, and many androids were descending from the sky towards him at high speed. Piccolo launches dozens of energy balls at the androids, destroying each one with one attack and causing a series of explosions across the sky. But among all these destroyed enemies, 2 survived the Namekian's attacks, proving to be stronger than others. These 2 androids arrive at Piccolo with a sequence of attacks, pressing the Universe 7 warrior, who needs to retreat while defending himself until he can no longer avoid the attacks and is hit by a blow from the 2 that pushes him away. After recovering from the blow, Piccolo sees that the 2 enemies were still coming towards him, thirsty for more, and so the Namekian finally unleashes his potential. In doing so, he used his speed boost to dodge the androids, letting them pass right by him. And after doing so, Piccolo stretches out both his arms and grabs both androids by the ankles. With the 2 enemies literally in his hands, Piccolo sees another group of androids come flying towards him. And then, guiding the androids he has grabbed with his outstretched arms, he uses their bodies to target the approaching androids, using the 2 strongest androids as batons to hit and destroy the weaker androids. After using the bodies of these 2 androids to destroy their own allies, Piccolo locks his arms towards each other, shocking them both to the center and destroying them on impact. As soon as his arms are back to normal size, he opens his arms and fires a wave of energy from each hand that destroys 2 more androids that were coming from his side, while shooting an energy wave from his mouth at another android that came in front of him. Frost was another one who disconnected from all members of the group, being alone among many enemies. Universe 6's Rogue Warrior fires multiple energy lasers at a large group of androids that fly towards him, destroying them all. After doing so, he notices another group approaching, and all the androids launch several waves of energy in his direction at once. Frost prepares a supernova and launches it towards the androids. All the energy waves hit the large energy globe, but despite being in large numbers, the androids lose the contest, and the energy globe reaches them, completely swallowing them all, and then explodes in the sky, destroying many other robots around. After doing so, Frost smiles, saying that they were all trash. But this speech is immediately refuted when an android comes at high speed, surprising him and hitting him with an attack that knocks him away, and then fires a great wave of energy at the mortal. Frost, seeing that energy attack coming towards him, stops the displacement in the air caused by the force of the android's blow, and also fires a wave of energy in response. The attacks collide, but he has every disadvantage, and the android's energy keeps coming this way. With no choice, Frost immediately shifts into his form with 100% power released, causing his energy to double in size, and start charging against the android's energy, which within seconds is completely destroyed by the attack. But Frost doesn't have time to rest and sees that two other enemies almost as strong as the one he just destroyed are flying towards him. Combining the feeling of tiredness and irritation, the Universe 6 mortal yells, "Damn this tournament!" Gohan is surrounded by opponents that attack him at the same time, but even in base form he can dodge and defend attacks. When he finally decides to counterattack, Gohan manages to destroy each enemy with a single blow. But then he sees, coming towards him, preparing a punch, an android that was worth a great number of points. Seeing that he couldn't withstand that enemy's attack in base form, Gohan immediately transforms into a Super Saiyan at the same moment that his fist collides with the enemy's, which at the moment of collision has his arm destroyed by the impact. After destroying the enemy's arm with his fist, Gohan finishes him off with a kick that destroys his entire body, but then another android comes up to him to exchange blows, and even being in Super Saiyan, Gohan has a disadvantage against this enemy, who hits a blow that launches the warrior towards the ground. Gohan manages to land on the ground without crashing into it, but as soon as he touches the ground, a group of weaker androids rushes towards him, grabbing him, forming a veritable cluster of robots around him. A few seconds later, an energy blast occurs, destroying all the robots in the next moment. It could be seen that it was now in Super Saiyan 2, emanating the flaming electric aura of this transformation. The android that hit Gohan earlier, who was facing the Saiyan from the sky, launches a great wave of energy, such that Gohan responds with a Masenko. The two attacks collide, but Gohan quickly gains the upper hand, and his energy reaches the android and destroys the machine. Jiren is on the ground, surrounded by an army of broken robots. The Pride Warrior is very disappointed, frustrated, and angry. It's a shame for him to have to fight such mediocre opponents. It can't stay that way. He needs to find an opponent who is truly worthy of his time. Jiren looks up at the sky and sees an army of androids flying towards him. Fearless, he launches himself into an ultra-fast flight towards enemies, reaching incredible speed in such a short time that he leaves his body covered in a beam of light and energy. Jiren clashes with those who came to attack him, and all androids that touch his body are instantly destroyed, leaving a true line of destruction in the sky, passing right through enemies as if they were just trash in his path. Jiren soars high above the planet's clouds and almost into space. Seeing the planet from above, he looks in all directions. Jiren is looking for the strongest androids, those three that the Daishinkan had said were the strongest of them all. Finally seeing the enemy, he heads towards the region of the planet he is on. The android is on top of one of the mountains, the biggest ones in fact on the planet. He is standing on a stone as thin as the stake, surrounded by clouds. Jiren comes to him and faces the enemy. The score for that android was 500,000 points. Looking at the machine before him, Jiren says, "You are among the best this challenge can offer me. Let's see what you represent before my power." Jiren emanates a large amount of power. Only the pressure of the warrior's energy causes the rock the android is on to be completely destroyed, but the machine remains stationary in the same place. Seeing the android's indifferent reaction to his power, Jiren lets out a discreet smile and says, "So you can withstand the pressure of my energy without suffering any shock to your body. Very well. Maybe you really are a worthy opponent." Goku and Vegeta are flying over the top of a volcano. They are surrounded by enemies, destroying them all with their blows. Amidst the enemies, Goku is attacked by one that is clearly much stronger than the others, and the Saiyan exchanges blows intensely with his opponent. In a moment, the robot advances towards Goku, grabbing the Saiyan and carrying him towards the inside of the volcano. Goku and the android enter the volcano, reaching the point of almost diving into the sea of lava. But Goku at the last moment manages to free himself from the enemy's grip and fires a wave of energy at him that pushes the robot into the lava. In a second, he's surrounded again, and then he creates two Kienzans and launches them at enemies while manipulating the discs. Manipulating the two attacks, Goku slashes all surrounding enemies, destroying them. Vegeta is still at the top of the volcano, facing his opponents with ease and destroying a large number of enemies, until at one point he starts fighting an android that is stronger than average. Even though that android is stronger than most there, Vegeta has a great advantage, exchanging blows against the enemy, and in one moment he lands a strong punch in the center of the android's body, and this blow simply dismantles the machine's body. But to Vegeta's surprise, when the android's body is broken into several pieces, each piece regenerates, creating a new, identical android, each with exactly the same level of power. The new androids attack the Universe 7 warrior at the same time, and being attacked by them from all sides, Vegeta is put under a lot of pressure. But the Saiyan Prince's patience is short, and getting more and more furious, fighting those annoying robots, Vegeta accumulates a large amount of energy, being surrounded by a golden energy globe, and then the Saiyan releases that same great power, making the energy globe that surrounded him bigger and bigger, starting a process of destruction in the whole area. Goku, who is fighting inside the volcano, sees the energy approaching and is comically scared, asking Vegeta to calm down and reminding his companion that he was still there. Vegeta's energy expands for many kilometers, destroying all the robots in that area as well as the environment itself, making that place an empty land. After that, Vegeta stands in the sky, reflective. Goku arrives at him with instant transmission, complaining, "Hey Vegeta, don't attack like that, you almost hit me!" But concentrating on something else, Vegeta replies, "Shut up, Kakarot. Stop whining. Of course you wouldn't be killed by that attack. Instead of complaining, pay attention to this overwhelming ki." When Vegeta says this, Goku also notices something, and then he comments, "That's Jiren's ki. It's a very high level. He must be fighting someone very powerful." Vegeta agrees, and then he theorizes, "Remember that before this stage started, the Grand Priest talked about 3 androids who were above everyone else. Jiren must be fighting one of them." A little jealous, Goku says, "Oh man, I wanted to fight one of those. Now there's only 15 minutes left for the tournament to end, and I still haven't been able to find any of them." Vegeta agrees. "It's really frustrating that we can't face these more powerful androids, and instead, we'll have to face these weak worms." In the place where those watching the tournament are, the Zeno, seeing and hearing the conversation between Goku and Vegeta, are very sad. They're not happy with the fact that Goku isn't having fun in the tournament. They ask the Daishinkan why Goku is so sad. They thought that if he had more enemies to face, Goku would be happy. The Daishinkan explains to the 2 supreme gods, "Lord Zeno, I theorize that for someone like Mr. Goku, what matters is not necessarily the number of opponents he faces, but the power level of his opponent. I think for him to face many androids is not so fun if they are not such a challenge for him." Understanding the situation now, the Zeno asks what they can do to make it better, and the Daishinkan replies, "Among the millions of androids scattered across the planet arena, there are 3 that are especially powerful, and can give even the most powerful participants a tough fight. I assume that Mr. Goku and Mr. Vegeta want to face these opponents, just like Mr. Jiren is doing." Liking this idea, the Zeno asks him where these 3 androids are now. The Grand Priest explains, "Well, one of them was found by Mr. Jiren and he is fighting him right now. The other 2 are at different points on Planet Arena, and they are very far from Mr. Goku and Mr. Vegeta. Even with the ability to see enemies around them, they will not be able to find these androids. And since these androids are really far away from them, the machines won't attack them." Hearing this and thinking for a few seconds, the Zenos find a solution. "Why not make these androids go after Goku and Vegeta? It'll be more fun that way." Smiling sympathetically, Daishinkan says that if it's what they want, then so be it. In the frozen region of the planet, on top of the highest glacier, there was an android completely still. Suddenly this android starts to move, flying out of that place at high speed. In the center of the largest ocean on the planet, submerged in the deepest regions, is another android standing still. Just like with the other one, this machine also suddenly starts to move, flying out of the seafloor with such great power that as soon as it emerges from the water, it creates multiple giant waves in that place. Goku and Vegeta are still standing in the same spot with an expression of frustration. They see a great army of androids approaching around them. Vegeta, seeing the enemies coming, complains, "Ah, very good. More useless worms to get in our way." But suddenly Goku realizes something and alarms his companion. Wait, Vegeta, are you seeing this? Looks like two androids with a high level of power are coming this way. When Goku says this, Vegeta also notes, That's right, Kakarot. It looks like they're both worth 500,000 points. The other androids heading towards the two Saiyans simply gave up on advancing, and then they dispersed, each going in different directions. That way, the path is clear for the two approaching androids. One stopped his flight facing Goku, and the other facing Vegeta. Back to back, the rivals face those who have just arrived with a smile on their faces. Goku says, Look at this, Vegeta. It seems like they decided to look for us. I don't think we have anything to complain about, right? Vegeta responds, Right. Let's see what these idiots are made of. Broly is in the sky making a power contest against a group of androids. The Saiyan from Universe 7 launches a wave of energy against his enemies, and the robots did the same against him. But despite the numerical disadvantage, the mortal has the complete advantage in the contest, and it doesn't take long for Broly's energy to catch up with the androids and wipe them out of existence. After that, two androids attack Broly, one coming from each side of the Saiyan and hitting him with a punch in the face, but Broly remains completely still, indifferent to those attacks. He counterattacks by grabbing the androids by their heads and shocking both of their faces, which have their faces exploded in that moment of shock. But suddenly the Saiyan notices something, or rather someone. An android very different from the others, much more muscular, arrives before him. Looking at the android, he saw that the machine was worth 301,000 points. That one wasn't more powerful than the last strongest opponent he'd faced at this stage, but it certainly wouldn't be an easy enemy either. The android flies towards Broly, and the Saiyan, with no sign of hesitation, does the same. The two clash fists, causing a huge wave of impact. Broly loses the power contest and is thrown away by the opponent's force. But the android doesn't want to give peace to the mortal and follows his movement through the sky, delivering several blows against the Saiyan, who receives those attacks with considerable pain, feeling that the blows of that machine were really heavy. Broly finally reacts by firing a point-blank energy wave at the attacking android, completely engulfing the robot's body. But to the Saiyan's surprise, the android remains unharmed, even after that massive attack, and taking the hand that Broly used to release the energy, spin him around several times before flinging him again. Broly travels a great distance through the sky until he crashes into the peak of a large mountain. But a short time later, the stone in which Broly was buried by the force of the impact explodes while revealing a powerful energy. Broly emanates this energy while showing Ikari's form. He has decided that he will use his bestial power against this enemy. Piccolo flees, flying between the rocks of a mountain from a group of androids that chase him avidly. In a moment, the Namekian enters a large cave and realizes that he has no way out of there. He finds himself surrounded by a large number of enemies who prepare to attack him, extending their arms to the Universe 7 warrior and preparing attacks of energy. But Piccolo smiles, saying they fell for the trick like real idiots. After that, he disappears, revealing himself to be just a clone. Meanwhile, outside that cave, the real Piccolo accumulates a large amount of energy in his hands, and then launches it into the cave, causing an immense explosion that destroys that entire region up the mountain, surely eliminating all those enemies at once. After doing this, Piccolo smiles. It saves him a lot of time, but then the Namekian notices someone behind him, another android. Looking at this android, he sees that he is only worth 100 points, meaning it's extremely weak for someone like him. But Piccolo is completely taken aback when this android begins to dramatically increase in size, becoming a true giant. But it wasn't just the android's body that increased, but also its power. Now that enemy was worth 100,000 points. Looking at it, Piccolo's size, it looks like a big problem has just arisen. Literally a big problem. Kaba, Kale, and Caulifla face off against a large group of androids. Kaba destroys several enemies with his blows when another group of enemies comes towards him to attack. Caulifla appears behind him carrying an energy attack in her hands, ordering Kaba to get out of the way. Kaba does as she says as the girl fires a large wave of energy that hits all the enemies coming towards the boy, destroying them all. A group of androids was coming towards Caulifla from behind, but Kale went behind Caulifla's back, launching a great wave of energy at them as well, destroying them all. Caulifla smiles, saying that these stupid robots will never outrun the Saiyans. But the trio are on the alert when a different enemy arrives, an android worth 105,000 points. Seeing this android, the three look more serious and tense. That was definitely not an enemy to be underestimated. Kaba and Caulifla, who are in Super Saiyan, transform into Super Saiyan 2. Gohan is on the ground in a forest region and there are many destroyed enemies around, indicating that Universe 7 Saiyan has already eliminated a large number of opponents. But suddenly the branches of the trees around him are ripped off by a mysterious force, and after that these branches turn into metal stakes, which are all thrown towards him, who needs to escape with a jump, leaving the mysterious stakes drilled into the ground instead. Gaining altitude and heading for the sky, Gohan sees that above the trees there is an android who is certainly the one who did it. But this enemy was much more powerful than average, worth 50,000 points. Gohan concentrates his power, going from Super Saiyan 2 to mystical form. And by doing this fighting stance, the Saiyan assures the android that he has no intention of losing. Goku and Vegeta back-to-back face the two androids who are among the three most powerful. The Saiyans are eager to see what the machines above all are made of. At the same time, the two transform into Super Saiyan Blue, and Vegeta gives the initiative, advancing and attacking the android that was facing him. But the great speed of the machine surprises the Saiyan, who doesn't hit anything but the air, and then notices the enemy is already on his back preparing a blow. Vegeta is hit by the android's powerful attack, which sends him flying far away. Goku, startled by what just happened, calls out to Vegeta, looking back to see how his teammate was doing. But the moment Goku turns back to the android he was facing, he's completely surprised to see that the enemy was already ahead of him, preparing a blow. A very strong punch from the android hits Goku's abdomen, who spits out a large amount of blood while groaning in pain. After this blow, the android grabs Goku's hair with one hand, and with the other touches the Saiyan's face and fires a wave of energy that carries him far back, causing Goku to collide with a large desert rock, making the rock crumble and become buried among the rubble. The android's next attack is to create a large globe of energy and launch it against the rubble that Goku was in, destroying not only all those stones, but also the entire region. But Goku was not hit by that attack. He was already behind the android with an instant transmission while concentrating the Kamehameha. The moment the android turns towards him, Goku unleashes the attack, completely engulfing the robot's body with his energy. But when the attack ends, he sees that the enemy was not there, but was already behind him. Surprised and startled by the opponent's speed, Goku immediately backs away. Realizing that the amount of power was far from enough to face that enemy, Goku decides to use more power, now emanating the aura of Super Saiyan Blue with the Kaioken. As he does so, he smiles, wondering how far this enemy will take him. In another region of the desert, there was a large crater in the ground. Inside that crater was Vegeta, who opened that hole in the ground with his own body after receiving that android attack. Recovering from the blow, the Saiyan flies out of the hole to face the enemy, who was floating in the sky waiting for him. Vegeta admits to his enemy that he is strong, and he deserves to see a little more of his Saiyan power. Vegeta concentrates power, invoking the aura of the Super Saiyan Blue. His aura is bigger only than used to be, while his body becomes more muscular. It's the Super Saiyan Blue evolution. After transforming, Vegeta tells his opponent to do his best. In the great desert of planet Arena, Goku fights intensely against the android, the one who is among the three most powerful androids on the planet. Goku fights the enemy using the Super Saiyan Blue with his power increased 10 times by the Kaioken. But even using so much power, Goku is at a complete disadvantage in battle, retreating while exchanging blows with the enemy who is advancing easily. In a moment, Goku is no longer able to counterattack the opponent, only managing to block his blows. But in a short time, he can't even do that anymore, and the Saiyan warrior is left only to receive a large number of attacks that hurt his entire body. Unable to react to his opponent anymore, Goku escapes with the instant transmission, with the intention of gaining some distance. But to his surprise, the enemy follows him with such great speed that he is already behind him, ready to hit another attack. Such an attack that upon hitting the protagonist, sends him directly face first into a stone pillar in the desert, which collapses under the Saiyan. Goku destroys that stone pillar, emanating again the aura of the Super Saiyan Blue. But now with the Kaioken increased by 20 times, Goku flies towards the enemy, who calmly waits for him. The warrior who emanates the blue and red aura tries many attacks against the machine, which despite the protagonist's power increase, avoids his blows very easily. When he gets tired of just avoiding the attacks, the android decides to counterattack with a punch to Goku's chest, whose impact wave passes directly through the protagonist's chest and hits a rock pillar behind him, completely destroying the pillar. Goku remains still as the enemy's hand touches his chest, and taking this opportunity he grabs the android's wrist with one hand, while aiming the other at him, and fires an energy attack directly in his face. Goku smiles, finally managing to catch him. But in the next second, the man's smile fades, seeing that the machine was unharmed even with this attack. The android decides to play the same way as Goku, also pointing one of his hands at him and firing an even bigger energy attack. which engulfs not only Goku's face but his entire body. In another region of that same desert, Vegeta was also suffering against his enemy, one of the three most powerful androids who crossed the sky carrying the Saiyan with an uninterrupted sequence of blows, until he finally decided to interrupt his sequence of attacks by hitting a much stronger blow on Vegeta, who is thrown against a mountain. After crashing his body with this mountain, Vegeta sees that the android is already preparing its next attack, an immense globe of energy. The Saiyan decides to stop that attack by extending his arm and firing a Big Bang attack, and his energy hits the android's energy globe, creating a huge explosion. Vegeta smiles, asking what that damn machine thought of that. But his smile is short-lived, as he sees the machine coming out of the smoke, coming at him at high speed with his body intact. The android reaches Vegeta with a blow that sinks the Saiyan's body into the rocks and carries him inside the mountain, crossing this mountain to the other side. And even after crossing all the rocks, the android continues carrying Vegeta through the sky, until it decides to stop the flight in the middle of the way, letting Vegeta go a further distance, until he loses his altitude and falls to the ground. But the massacre is not over yet, as the moment Vegeta falls, a truly storm of ki balls fall on him, covering the Saiyan and the entire area in multiple explosions. But it wasn't just Goku and Vegeta who were having a hard time. All over Planet Arena, the participants were going through intense battles. But in many cases, these participants' problems were not powerful opponents, but the sheer amount of enemies. Ever since the Daishinkan changed the rules of the competition to please the Great Zeno, the android started attacking the participants who didn't expect this sudden change in the rules. Shimizu tried as best he could to escape and counterattack the large number of enemies with his instant transmission, but defeat came to the Yard Rat, who was surrounded by a large number of opponents. And having no more energy to teleport after having used the technique hundreds or thousands of times, he was targeted by a sequence of energy shots and defeated after these multiple attacks. Ribrianne also tried to fight as far as she could, trying to battle all enemies, even though she struggled in solitude and without the love of her companions to warm her heart and give her strength. But the warrior of love met her sad end in the tournament after finally giving in to the sadness of loneliness, completely giving up the fight to cry. Yes, she gave up the fight to cry. Things weren't going well for Universe 9's trio of warriors either. Bergamo, Basil, and Lavender had their teamwork simply broken by the sheer number of enemies, which by the amount forced the three warriors to part ways. Fighting apart, they resisted as best they could, but the sheer amount of enemies, especially some more powerful ones, who were among the crowd of machines, caused them to wear out. And even as they fought valiantly, the three K9 warriors finally fell. A group of androids advanced towards Toppo, who fires his Justice Flash at them, which destroys most enemies, with the exception of a few more powerful ones that protect themselves with energy shields. These enemies arrive at the warrior and initiate melee combat, but despite being stronger than average, they also don't last long against Toppo, who destroys them with his blows. But after Toppo destroys these foes, dozens more surround him from a distance and launch hundreds of energy attacks at the Universe 11 warrior. With no option to dodge, Toppo has to take all these attacks. The Pride Trooper's boss doesn't fall, and after receiving these multiple standing attacks, he counters by unleashing an immense amount of power that, as it spreads across that area, destroys the surrounding enemies that attacked him. After doing so, Toppo drops to his knees, panting heavily. But the problem is not over yet, as more enemies are already coming towards him. But suddenly a hand touches his shoulder. Who did it is Dispo, who, like him, has a tired appearance. Dispo tells his companion that they can't fight alone anymore. If they want to survive this game, they must do it as companions and friends. Toppo agrees, and as he stands up, he tells his companion with an expression of great determination that they will remain standing until the end, no matter what. Frieza and Cooler are back-to-back, destroying a large number of enemies with their energy attacks. Cooler is extremely angry, complaining about the fact that no matter how many of these worms they destroy, they always seem to be more. Frieza is in the same mood as his brother, adding that no matter how weak these enemies are, having to destroy so many of them forces them to spend a lot of energy, and that will hurt them a lot for the rest of the tournament. But in a moment, the two notice a large energy attack coming towards them. The brothers dodge the attack, letting the energy hit the ground and destroy a vast area of that region. Looking at who launched that attack, they see that it's a strange four-armed android, and they also realize that android isn't weak like the others. He's worth 100,000 points. It's an enemy that will certainly take a lot of work. Cooler is the first to attack, fighting towards the enemy and landing many hits on him. But to Frieza's brother's surprise, his attacks are simply insignificant to the android, who responds with just one punch that causes Cooler a lot of pain and makes him retreat, returning to Frieza's side.
Frieza also decides to test the opponent, but instead of trying a physical blow, he launches an energy attack at the android, which easily stops the attack with just one hand. And all Frieza's attacks does to his hand are just a few scratches. Seeing this, Frieza tells Cooler that the enemy is too strong and can't be defeated that easily. This is a battle for the great Emperor to face. Frieza transforms into Golden Frieza and says he needs focus to face this enemy, so Cooler must take care of the other androids and not let them interrupt him. Cooler agrees and also transforms. He assures his brother that none of those hundreds of enemies will ever touch him while he fights. Frieza smiles and says it's good for his brother to honor those words. Frieza advances toward the most powerful android. A group of androids try to attack him, but Cooler gets in front of them, destroying them all with an energy attack. Frost is having a bad time in his battle. The Universe 6 participant is completely surrounded by enemies. He takes on multiple androids and destroys all enemies that get in his way. But there's also more to destroy. Shooting many lasers from his fingers, he destroys a group of androids in front of him. After that, seeing some machines approaching from behind him, he turns around while extending both hands and firing a large wave of energy at another group of androids, destroying them all. Seeing more enemies coming from under him, he creates a supernova and launches it at them, also destroying them all. But after that, he is hit by a hail of key balls thrown over him. The attacks explode on Frost, who falls from the sky to the ground, being brought to his knees. Frost immediately stands up and angrily extends his hands to the sky, releasing a large amount of key balls that destroy all the androids that shot him. But after that last attack, he finally lets his fatigue show and loses his form 100%, with his big muscles having drastically reduced in size. Although Frost's muscles shrunk, his enemies didn't, who were coming from all directions, ready to destroy him. But before these enemies reach Frost, they are suddenly destroyed, surprising him. The next moment, Frost understands what has happened. It's Hit, who used the time skip to destroy those enemies, and is now standing beside him. Frost asks his teammate what he's doing. He didn't ask for help, and it's not even like Hit to help others. Hit replies that in this situation, the smartest thing for them to do is to help each other. Besides, facing all these enemies alone is very exhausting. Even if most androids are not powerful, Frost is forced to agree. In fact, these worms might not be much of a thing when they're alone, but when dozens come at once, it becomes quite tiring to crush them. Seeing a slough of enemies approaching again for all directions, Frost and Hit position themselves for battle, both watching each other's backs. Broly faces an android in the sky, an android that stood out for a different physical characteristic, the big muscles. Universe 7's legendary Super Saiyan faces his opponent in Ikari form. His bestial Uzaru power is unleashed. While issuing a loud and fierce battle cry, Broly launches himself into a flight towards the android, who does the same. The two clash their fists violently, one stopping the other's movement. Broly takes the advantage by hitting a sequence of blows on the android, who after receiving the attacks, manages to counterattack by returning the blows to the Saiyan. Broly intercepts the enemy's blows by launching a wave of energy at point-blank range from his two hands. The mortal's energy pushes the android through the sky, until the machine manages to stop its own movement, and instead of being pushed by the energy, it pushes the energy, advancing towards Broly, who even putting more power into the attack, can't stop the opponent's advance, who reaches him holding both his hands and taking the Saiyan's hands out of the way. Hits a strong headbutt in his face, but Broly, avoiding being stunned by the attack, headbutts the android, causing the machine to release him. Broly holds the android's head in one of his hands and carries the robot through the sky to a large mountain, where the Saiyan rubs the enemy's face while carrying him, leaving a line of destruction in the rocks. But in a moment, the android stops his movement, striking an elbow in Broly's abdomen and making him drop his head, to then grab the Saiyan's head and violently crash it against the mountain, opening a hole in the rocks. After hitting Broly's head many times against the rocks, the android decides to descend from the sky to the ground, landing on the stony ground of the mountain while also slamming Broly's head into the ground rocks. Even with his head buried in the ground, Broly extends one of his hands and fires a key ball that hits the android's face, causing a small explosion. But that's enough for the enemy to release him. Getting this gap, Broly grabs the opponent's ankle and, getting up, pulls the machine by the ankle while using the enemy as a whip, striking the ground and surrounding rocks, destroying the area with the robot's body. The android finally reacts by killing a key ball at Broly's face as well, forcing the Saiyan to release his ankle, and then lunge his body towards Broly, carrying him across a large area, destroying a large amount of rocks, only stopping when it hits Broly's back with a huge stone wall. Leaving the Saiyan with his back buried in the rocks, the android points his hand at him, firing an immense wave of energy that engulfs not only Broly but the entire mountain behind him. Looks like Universe 7's legendary Super Saiyan is still in for a very tough fight. Gohan and an android fight a fierce battle in the sky above a large forest. The Saiyan uses his ultimate form against the enemy, an android worth 50,000 points. They fight equally, exchanging blows intensely, dodging and blocking each other's attacks. For a moment, Gohan gains the upper hand and lands a few hits on the enemy, who quickly reacts and also lands a few hits on him, after which they return to their initial state. But in a moment, the android holds out a hand and a branch from one of the trees below them breaks free and flies into the machine's hand. And as soon as it touches the wood with its hand, the robot transforms the branch into a metal stake. Gohan immediately needs to back off to avoid being slashed by the android using the stake. After the Saiyan retreats, the enemy decides to advance against him, trying many punches, such as Gohan dodges with great skill. But he needs to do this while retreating, as his opponent attacks with great speed. After dodging a lunge from the machine, Gohan ends up being hit by the robot's kick, so strong that it makes him involuntarily fly for hundreds of meters until he hits his back hard on the rocks of a mountain. As he hits the rocks, Gohan sees the metal stake coming towards him, thrown hard by the android. He rolls on these rocks to dodge and sees the stake pierce those rocks and go through that whole mountain. The android takes advantage of Gohan's distraction with the stake to come over him and strike an attack that launches the Saiyan into the forest below them. Gohan stops his flight before hitting the ground. But when he looks up, he sees that the android, using telekinetic force, has ripped off several branches from the surrounding trees and turned all those branches into metal stakes. The robot hurls all these weapons towards Gohan, who needs to escape in a low flight while dodging the various spikes that fall from the sky like a rain of metal piercing the ground below him as he dodges. While dodging the multiple attacks coming from the sky, Gohan turns his body upwards while launching several key balls at the enemy, who in addition to throwing the stakes at him, now also has to dodge his attacks. Kaba, Kale, and Cauliflower side by side floating in the sky as they face their next enemy. The trio of young Saiyans from Universe 6 had before them an android far more powerful than average, an android worth 105,000 points. The three were very worried, and they just don't know if they'll be able to defeat this enemy. Kaba admits that, given the power level of this opponent, a single blow might be enough to defeat him. Cauliflower, not even wanting to, admits that things wouldn't be so different with her. She's not sure if she can withstand many attacks from this enemy. Kaba asks if it is not better for her to transform into Super Saiyan 3, like she did before. She replies that if she transforms, she will lose energy very quickly, and in a few minutes, she won't be able to fight anymore. She has to avoid using Super Saiyan 3 for now. Kale says that if that's the case, she, who has more raw power, will take the lead in the fight, while Kaba and Cauliflower must look for gaps to attack. The other two, seeing no other option, agree. Kale, who was already in Super Saiyan, concentrates her energy even more, and after doing that she advances against the enemy, initiating an exchange of blows against him. But in a few seconds of melee combat, she is already at a complete disadvantage, being completely cornered by the opponent. But all she wanted was to distract the enemy so that Kaba and Cauliflower surround him from the sides, and each on one side fires an energy attack as she walks away. At the exact moment that Kale walked away, the android is hit by the attacks of the other two Saiyans, being the center of a huge explosion. But the next moment, they are surprised when the machine's arms come out of the smoke and grabs their necks. When the smoke clears, the robot is seen to be unharmed, even after those powerful attacks from Kaba and Cauliflower, and he stretched out his arms to capture both of them. The monster makes its arms go back to normal size, while at the same time it pulls Kaba and Cauliflower, bringing them both towards it while shocking their faces with great force. Seeing this, Kale furiously lunges at the android, who releases Kaba and Cauliflower, letting them fall, and then charges at Kale, intercepting her advance with a flying kick in the stomach of the stronger Saiyan. After abruptly stopping Kale's advance with his blow, the android launches her away with a second and also very strong attack. Piccolo flees through the mountains as he is showered with energy lasers launched by the giant android, who has one of his hands pointed at the sky as he fires dozens of hundreds of attacks. Piccolo is having a hard time dealing with that enemy, who, in his giant form, is worth 100,000 points. He finally decides to stop running and heads towards the enemy while dodging his attacks. Reaching the giant's face, he tries many attacks, but his blows have no effect on the opponent, who appears to be being attacked by a fly. The giant's body is taken over by an electric current that electrocutes the Namekian, who has to give up the physical attack while moving away, trying an energy attack, which also hits the monster's face without causing any apparent damage. Landing on top of a rock at the top of a mountain, Piccolo reflects that in this form, he will not be able to defeat this giant. The Namekian begins to focus his power, releasing an immense pillar of energy that completely hides his body. When this pillar of energy disappears, Piccolo shows the enemy his orange form. Orange Piccolo assumes the android that from that moment on, he will no longer be able to receive his attacks with such indifference. In the immense sea of planet Arena, there is a seemingly peaceful island, but all this tranquility ends when a flash of light falls from the sky and hits the ground of the place, which is completely destroyed on impact. And that peaceful island from a moment to the other becomes just pieces of land floating in the sea. The one that reached the island after crossing the ground of the small piece of land quickly sinks into the ocean. It's Goku who is badly hurt. As he sinks into the sea, Goku thinks, that android is absolutely insane. Even using the Kaioken increased by 20 times with the Super Saiyan Blue, I couldn't do anything against him. None of my attacks even scratched him, while his attacks are tearing me apart. But despite being in such a difficult situation, Goku can't avoid a smile. Goku says, I can't believe there could be such a strong machine in this place. I'm even excited. Something plummets from the sky towards the sea at very high speed. It is the android which plunges into the water with such violence that it creates a great uproar in the sea. Goku is alarmed to see the enemy coming towards him. But before the Saiyan can react, the android grabs his neck, initiating a violent strangulation as he carries him deeper and deeper. Vegeta is being carried across the sky of the great desert by the android, who carries the Prince of the Saiyans while punishing his body with many strong attacks that make the warrior prince's royal blood spill with each impact. After receiving dozens of attacks without being able to defend himself, Vegeta is completely stunned and is about to fall from the sky. But the android doesn't let him, grabbing his hair with one hand, while with the other hand, he lands many blows all over his body. Satisfied, the android spins Vegeta into the air and launches him towards the ground. The Saiyan warrior falls violently to the ground, cracking a large area around him. Looking at the sky, paralyzed by the pain of so many attacks, Vegeta sees the enemy staring at him from above, pointing his hands at him as he gathers energy for his next ultimate attack. Far away from these battles, above the highest mountains of planet Arena, Jiren faces his enemy, another of the Daishinkan's 3 most powerful androids. The most powerful mortal in Universe 11, and one of the Daishinkan's most powerful machines, exchange blows intensely across the sky, and only with the impact of their blows were the rocks of the mountains destroyed. Jiren finds a breach and hits the android with a punch so powerful that the impact of the blow overtakes the machine's body and destroys a large part of the mountain behind him. But the creature doesn't let this go unpunished, and it also lands an equally strong blow on Jiren, who also destroys a large part of the scenery behind him. But Jiren seems to have felt this attack more, as unlike the android, who could respond to the attack immediately, the mortal is unable to counterattack. He recoils in pain, but the android doesn't intend to let Jiren recover, and disappearing from in front of him, reappears above the warrior, hitting an energy attack so powerful that the energy carries Jiren to the rocks of the mountain, buries him in the rocks, and carries Jiren all over that extremely large mountain, leaving a trail of destruction thousands of kilometers from top to bottom of that colossal stone fortress. But being carried to the foot of the mountain isn't enough. Jiren breaks through the planet's ground and is buried deeper, sinking deeper and deeper into planet Arena's ground until he finally reaches the center of the planet, a great sea of lava. Jiren is submerged in the sea of lava which engulfs the warrior of pride. But it doesn't take long for the man to show his face again, emerging with an expression of fury. From the gaping hole at the top of the place he fell into, coming from the path that Jiren was forced to dig with his own body from the top of the mountain to the center of the planet, came the android. Facing the enemy, Jiren admits that he is indeed as powerful as Daishinkan promised he would be, but even though he was just a machine, he was worthy of seeing his real power. Jiren begins to focus his energy, screaming, while emanating a high amount of power. The lava beneath him churns, like the sea facing the worst of storms. The entire structure around them starts to crack. Goku is being carried by the android to the deepest regions of the sea when he feels something shake. He immediately recognizes Jiren's ki, and even in the bad situation he's in, Goku smiles and reflects that even after all this time, he still finds Jiren's power amazing. Goku realizes that Jiren is not afraid to unleash his power against his opponent. For him, it doesn't matter what will happen in the next battles. For him, it only matters to win his current fight. Goku was avoiding making that choice, but there is no other option. He definitely needs to do his best in this fight. The protagonist closes his eyes and then he opens them. They are already a different color. The android is thrown forcefully out of the water as if it had received a powerful attack. His body is launched through the sky until it gains great altitude. Only then can it stop. Goku emerges from the water soon after, floating slowly as he faces his enemy. He is now using Ultra Instinct. Gaining altitude until he was face to face with his opponent, Goku tells him to get ready because now this fight has reached a new level. Vegeta is lying under the desert floor, looking at the enemy above him preparing his final attack. Feeling Jiren's enormous power that makes the entire planet tremble, Vegeta smiles. It seems that not even the great Jiren is managing to save energy against these enemies. If that's the case, what is he doing then? The android fires a powerful wave of energy towards him, but in an instant, all that energy disappeared, surprising the android. Looking down, the android sees that Vegeta is already on his feet, and with one of his hands outstretched, indicating that he has just launched an attack that was certainly responsible for the disappearance of his energy. Vegeta also doesn't look the same anymore. Now he's using Ultra Ego, and probably he destroyed the android's attack with a Hakai. Smiling as he looks at the enemy, the Prince of Saiyans assures him that now things won't be so easy anymore. At the center of the planet, Jiren has just concentrated his power, and then looking at the android, he orders his enemy to come to him. The android, who until this moment had only watched, waiting for the mortal to release as much energy as he wanted, now does as he says and advances. Jiren concentrates his power in one hand and makes a punching movement in the air, launching a wave of energy towards the opponent that hits the android. In the next moment, the machine is already crossing the planet's ground from below, emerging on the surface and stopping its forced displacement only when it is already in the sky. It is as if he had just crossed the planet's ground from center to surface in an instant. From the same hole the android was forced to dig with his body, Jiren emerges, floating slowly as he faces his opponent. Universe 11's mightiest warrior promises that from now on his enemy will see why even the gods fear him. Frieza has a fierce battle against his opponent, exchanging intense blows against him. At one point, Frieza tries to land a punch on the enemy, but his arm is held back. He tries to attack with his other arm, which is also held, and using two of its arms, it holds Frieza. The android uses the other two to hit him over and over again. After receiving many attacks, Frieza finally reacts by striking the enemy with his tail, knocking him away. And after gaining some space, he hits the opponent with several energy lasers, making him retreat even further. While firing his lasers at the strong android, Frieza notices an android coming from behind to attack him, but this enemy is destroyed when Cooler quickly arrives and strikes him. After destroying this android with his blow, Cooler launches a wave of energy at another group of enemies that approaches him, destroying them all. After doing so, Cooler reminds Frieza that he doesn't have to worry about these insignificant androids. He should focus on his opponent, but he responds to his older brother that it's not easy to trust his back to someone, especially someone from family. While blocking with his two main arms the lasers continuously launched by Frieza, the android stretches its two extra arms towards the Emperor to capture him, forcing Frieza to stop attacking with his lasers and move to escape. Frieza forms two energy discs in his hands and hurls them at the android's chasing arm, slashing them both. After cutting off his enemy's arms, Frieza fires towards him and attempts many attacks, such as the android blocks with difficulty. As he strikes his foe, Frieza scoffs at the fact that with two less arms, he doesn't fight as well. The Emperor extends both hands to the android, firing a powerful wave of point-blank energy that completely destroys the enemy. After doing so, he reverts to his base form while saying that at least that enemy served as a warm-up. With great difficulty, Kale maintains an exchange of blows against the android, who clearly has the upper hand against her. As she does so, Kaba and Caulifla surround them, looking for a gap in the robot to make an attack. At one point, Kale is hit by a blow from the android, but she takes advantage of that moment to grab his arm, and then tells Kaba and Caulifla that they should attack now. Kaba is the first to do something, advancing against the machine, concentrating all his strength in one hand and punching the robot in the back with all his might. But even Kaba's strongest punch had no effect on the machine, which apparently didn't take any damage from his blow. Surprising Kaba, the robot opens a hole in its back, causing something similar to a cannon barrel to appear in its body. And then he fires a ball of energy that, hitting Kaba, carries him a great distance, until the attack ends in a huge explosion. After receiving this attack, Kaba falls from the sky already in his base form and completely passes out. After doing so, the android makes the cannon move from its back to its chest, aiming at Kale and firing in the same manner. As with Kaba, Kale is carried away by a ball of energy, which then explodes. Seeing what happened to her friend, Caulifla is furious and attacks the android, landing many attacks on him. But the robot stays still, receiving all the attacks as if they were nothing. and then retaliates with a slap that counts for all the blows of Caulifla. The Saiyan girl is knocked back several meters by the attack. Furious at her weakness, Caulifla decides it's not time to save energy, and so she transforms into Super Saiyan 3. The girl concentrates all her power in her hands and shoots at the android, a huge wave of energy that completely engulfs the robot's body, which has remained completely still to receive the attack from the front. After finishing her attack, Caulifla gets very tired, remembering what Goku told her during the Tournament of Power. Using Super Saiyan 3 is really extremely tiring. To make matters worse, all the energy wasted was useless, as the android was still intact. Before Caulifla could think of her next move, the android lunges forward and lunges at her in the blink of an eye, landing a powerful punch to the girl's abdomen before she could react. Caulifla's transformation is over and she falls in a faint from the sky. Kale was just arriving when that happened, and seeing what that android did to her friend, the legendary Super Saiyan from Universe 6 goes completely furious, unleashing an extraordinary amount of power, dramatically growing her muscles, and finally transforming into a legendary Super Saiyan. Facing the enemy while emanating all her power, Kale warns him that he better prepare himself because she will make him suffer. Orange Piccolo faces his opponent. He's standing on top of a rock on a high mountain, looking at the giant that is before him. The android attacks Piccolo with a double slap, as if killing a fly. The smaller warrior escapes the attack and advances towards the giant, hitting him hard in the face. And even taking the attack from someone so small, the android is stunned, recoiling. The large robot responds by shooting from its eyes a huge energy laser, which Piccolo has to dodge, and after the Namekian sees a large chunk of the mountain behind him being completely obliterated by the giant's power. Piccolo smiles. It looks like this android is no joke. Piccolo starts moving, flying around the android and landing several attacks all over his body. From the legs to the head, all that can be seen from a distance is the tail of Piccolo's flight and the impact zones of the blows he inflicts on the colossal machine's body. Tired of taking so many attacks, the android titan creates an electrosphere around its body, electrocuting everything around it. And that includes Piccolo, who has his flight stopped while being severely electrocuted. When the electrosphere is undone by the android, Piccolo falls from the sky to the ground, and then the enemy completes the attack by stepping on it as if it were a simple ant. But then something surprises the android. His foot is lifted by Piccolo, and while he lifts the machine's big foot, the Namekian dramatically increases the size of his body, becoming giant as well. After becoming giant while holding the robot's foot, Piccolo launches the android into the air, knocking him backwards onto the ground. After being thrown by the giant Namekian, the android stands up, and then the two face each other for a moment. Smiling at his opponent, Piccolo teases him that he's not the only one who knows how to increase his size. Now the battle between titans will begin. In the sky of a large forest, Broly exchanges blows against his opponent. He is cornered by the enemy who's having the upper hand in the fight. Broly manages to find a gap between the android's attacks and lands a strong punch on the machine. But his punch is quickly answered by a much stronger punch, which sends Broly flying far away. The Saiyan crosses the sky, bypassing the forest zone and reaching a large open field, which is where he has his crash landing, destroying much of the ground during the collision. But that is not all. Before Broly could get up, the android reaches him in an ultra-fast flight and grabbed the Saiyan's neck as he began to carry him and destroyed the ground with the warrior's body in the process. The android carries Broly across the planet for a great distance and at a great speed until they reach a frozen zone. The ground Broly is dragged across is now made of ice. Deciding he would no longer sweep the planet's floor with the Saiyan, the android launches Broly towards a large glacier, which is completely cracked by the man's collision. With his body partially buried in ice, Broly can finally feel the pain that ripples through his entire body. Every muscle, every bone hurts. This enemy's attacks are really powerful. Broly decides that this way is impossible to win. He needs to unleash more power, even if he doesn't like doing it. Suddenly, the great glacier that was completely cracked is totally engulfed by the great energy. And out of this energy comes Broly, who is now transformed into a Super Saiyan. With two metal stakes in his hand, the android tries to pierce Gohan many times, but the Saiyan deftly dodges the robot's attacks, and finding a gap in the machine's attacks, lands a kick that knocks the enemy away. After fending off the robot, Gohan launches a Kamehameha at him, but the android immediately turns the two stakes in his hands into shields, and with these shields blocks Gohan's energy attack as he charges towards the Earthling Saiyan. Arriving at Gohan, the android lands a few hits on him using the metal shields, then knocks him away with a kick. As Gohan is knocked back by his final blow, the android turns the two shields in his hands into spears and hurls them at him. Recovering from the blow, Gohan narrowly dodges the first spear, then grabs the second spear, which misses his face by a few inches. With the metallic spear in hand, he advances towards the android to attack him with his own weapon. The android makes the first spear that Gohan dodged return, and almost stabs him in the back. But the Saiyan dodges, letting the spear go straight through to land in the android's hand. When Gohan arrives to attack, the android uses the weapon that just arrived in his hands to defend himself. The two begin an exchange of blows using their weapons, until the android surprises Gohan by making the spear in his hand become a sort of malleable metal rope that almost tangles with the warrior, who needs to let go of the weapon and walk away. When Gohan takes distance, the android throws the spear in his hand at him, and in order not to be hit by the attack, Gohan forms a ki shield in front of him, stopping the weapon, and then he directs this shield at the android, who needs to dodge to avoid being hit and charged by the energy shield. But when the android dodges, Gohan, already preparing a Kamehameha, goes behind the machine and launches a powerful attack at him. The energy wave hits the machine and destroys it. Seeing that he won this fight, Gohan sighs in relief. But the participant's peace doesn't last long, as in the next second he notices something that clearly worries him and flies out of there immediately. Piccolo exchanges brutal blows with the android. The two giants do this between the great rocks of the mountains. The giant android punches the giant Namekian, who then does the same, but the Universe 7 warrior's blow sends the robot back several steps. Piccolo dashes towards the enemy to continue his blows, but the android decides to use the environment to his advantage, and ripping off the top of a large rock next to him, uses it as a stick to strike Piccolo's face, causing the Namekian to stop the advance and retreat stunned. After Piccolo retreats, the android hurls a large chunk of rock at him, but Piccolo immediately reacts by reaching his hand towards the boulder, stopping it with his telekinetic force, and then using the same force of his mind to hurl the boulder towards the android, causing the large chunk of stone to hit the machine's face and shatter in the process. Taking advantage of the other giant being distracted by the large rock exploding in his face, Piccolo charges at him, concentrating strength in one of his hands, and then lands a strong punch in the enemy's chest, causing his structure to crack. Then, with the same hand, Piccolo fires a concentrated wave of energy that completely passes through the android's chest and back. Lastly, Piccolo lifts the android with his arms, placing the enemy above his head, and raising his head, releases a powerful wave of energy from his mouth that takes the android out of his hand and takes him very high into the sky, where the machine finally meets its end in a massive explosion. After destroying his enemy, Piccolo returns to his normal stature and is ready to revert to his base form as well, but he notices something that makes him give up and keep his most powerful form. The Namekian leaves that place at high speed. In the frozen region of the planet, Broly fights the android in the sky between the glaciers, but this time the combat is completely different, and instead of having a reasonable disadvantage against the enemy, Broly has a considerable advantage. This happened after he turned into a Super Saiyan, when he greatly increased his power. Broly lands many attacks on the android, cracking his entire body structure with his blows. The machine tries to react, retaliating with many attacks all over his body, but Broly doesn't feel much of the opponent's blows. Seeing that the fight was already over, Universe 7's legendary Super Saiyan decides to end it by holding one of the android's punches, and then destroys his entire body in one last concentrated punch. After finishing off this enemy, Broly looks at the sky with a worried expression, and leaves that place immediately. Kale is lying among the debris of a crater on the floor of a large open field, a crater that she herself has opened with her body. As she emerges from the rubble, the Saiyan looks at the enemy that stares at her from the sky. The android that now has a different appearance. He now has a kind of natural armor protecting his body. Kale wonders what happened. At one point, she seemed to be getting the upper hand in the fight, but suddenly the android's body changed, creating that armor, and now its power has also increased. Before, this android was worth 105,000 points, but now it's worth an incredible 210,000 points. Kale is scared, but she can't give up. For Kaba, and especially for Caulifla, she has to defeat this enemy. The Saiyan girl concentrates even more energy, increasing her power even more. She lunges at the enemy to attempt a hit, but the android grabs her hand and lands a strong blow to the girl's stomach, knocking her out. After knocking out Kale, the android lets go of her hand, letting her fall towards the ground. But someone comes flying and grabs Kale. It's Gohan, who holds her in his arms. Seeing Kale's condition, Gohan immediately realizes that she won't be able to fight for a while. Looking at the enemy, he says to wait for him. Gohan flies with Kale to a place a little far away and leaves her lying with her head resting on a rock. while telling the younger warrior to get some rest. As she leaves Kale down and gets up, Gohan notices that Piccolo is already behind him. The orange warrior asks how she is, and Gohan replies that she will be fine. Now they must deal with the one who did this to her. Gohan and Piccolo fly away, returning to where the android is. And when they arrive, they see that someone else is already facing the android, Broly. Gohan and Piccolo go to Broly's side and comment that the enemy is very powerful. They should fight together. The Saiyan agrees, as he doesn't want to have to waste too much power in this fight. And it's still dangerous for him to release too much power, as there's always the risk of him losing control. So it's better to fight as a team using less power than trying to win alone using too much power and get tired or lose control. But another problem arises. The three warriors notice that around them, coming from a long distance, an army of androids is approaching. This annoys Piccolo, even though the enemies that are approaching are not powerful. They are many, and they will certainly get in their way. Gohan, also not happy with the situation, says that there is no choice. At least one of them must face these inferior enemies. But then they hear someone say that there is no need for them to worry about it. When they look at someone saying that, they see that it is Frost, who is accompanied by Hit. Hit compliments Frost's phase by saying that they will take care of the lesser enemies and not allow them to interfere in the fight. The three should only focus on the most powerful enemy. Piccolo smiles, saying they arrived just in time. Gohan agrees to the proposal, asking them to please watch their backs. Hit and Frost nod and disperse, each heading to one side and placing themselves in front of large lines of dozens of enemies. Meanwhile, Gohan, Piccolo, and Broly take up their fighting stances. Gohan says that even though Hit and Frost are very powerful and those enemies are weak, they are already very tired from all the battles they've had so far, and the enemies are aplenty, so the three of them can't take too long in this fight. Piccolo agrees. Apparently this android has some secret that made him defeat Kale, as at one moment her ki was very high facing him, but the next moment she started to lose her strength very fast. Whatever trick this android uses, they should beware. Gohan, Broly, and Piccolo are about to face a very powerful enemy that carries a big secret, and they need to defeat this threat quickly, as Hit and Frost are not in good moment to hold a very long fight against the android army that surrounds them. Goku, Vegeta, and Jiren, after discovering the high level of power of the three most powerful androids on the planet, realize that they could no longer fight conserving energy and decide that it was time to use their maximum powers in the fight. Jiren has already unleashed his monstrous power, while Goku uses Ultra Instinct and Vegeta uses Ultra Ego. Meanwhile, the other participants who are still standing have to face the large enemy hordes. Frieza, Cooler, Toppo, and Dispo struggle to stay on their feet until the end of the second stage, while Hit and Frost struggle to help Piccolo, Broly, and Gohan.